draws a relationship between women, water, religion, and art. Okay? So I think you will be sitting there and saying, what in the world? How is what she's going to talk about related to the topic for today? I mean, for this workshop for the week. In other words, in what way is, is this topic of mine relevant to our discussion of women and the diaspora? So before I get into my book, I want to suggest that in fact, we've been talking about diasporic experiences with a lot of emphasis on people who go to the US, like myself, or England, or Australia, or the Gulf countries, or some other part of the world, Canada maybe, and we think about that as diaspora, the scattering of people, the dispersal of people who leave their homes to go and settle in another place. I'm going to suggest to you to stretch your imagination today, okay, a little bit, and realize that women, the women I'm going to talk about, who go to fetch water, often come from rural areas. They are, they are a result of arranged marriages. They often have gone through an arranged marriage. They leave behind the village that they grew up in, the friends that she had, the family that she's leaving behind, and everything familiar and loved to her. And she goes off to be with her husband, and amongst large amounts of people in communities of migrants from village to town or village to village, it is the woman who had to go and fetch water, okay? So I'm going to suggest that their movement from their home environment, the familiar, much loved environment in which they grew up, to a new environment, a husband's home, and maybe a new village or a new town, is really similar to the diasporic experiences of people who move to a foreign country. They too represent a kind of scattering. They too experience nostalgia for their home, for the loved ones left behind. They too feel an alienation. They too feel dislocation. All the things we've been talking about for the last few days. So that I'm going to make a very strong case that these women also have experiences similar to those of diasporic women who move from home country to perhaps a foreign country. These women are also active agents in building a sense of community that they have left behind and long for. But this time, the community that they have built to replace what they have lost is really a community of women, all of whom are coming to the step wells to fetch water for their daily needs. You do understand that tap water, tap water that comes from your taps and all, is a relatively recent phenomena. In the old days, half a century ago or more, women had to go to the well to fetch water and then come back carrying the water on their heads. Now, I want to start off with, this is a photograph that I took. I'm very happy about it. This is from Gujarat, a woman standing there looking at the remains of one of the step wells. So it's sort of bringing together the two topics that I'm going to be bringing about today. So as I said, my book examines and documents the role women played in the building, you'd be surprised, and patronage of, and as inspiration for the many step wells of Gujarat. What I'm trying to do in the book is to provide a historical analysis and a visual documentation of these step wells, thereby contributing to a better understanding of the relationship between women, water, architecture, and religion. My work, I think, takes a unique perspective. It examines the step wells primarily as a distinct space for women. Okay, we talked about last few weeks about how diasporic women have to create a space for themselves. They have to create a new identity, and these women are doing that, but they're doing it at the step well. And so in my book, I focus on the unique perspective of the woman factor in the step wells. Why did I do this? Okay, why a book which took me 10 years of research? Because more often than not, women appear as silent spectators in history, not active participants. We talked about, I mentioned somewhere a few days ago that history is all about old men or dead men. And women have been left out of mostly historical scholarship. Recent scholarship, however, points to an urgent need to call into question why women's lives and their contributions have been so greatly neglected. I think there is an urgency for me, it was a compelling urgency to correct the historical record to more accurately reflect women's perspectives, their achievements, to hear their voices that have been silent so much in history, and therefore my project focuses on this. Let me tell you how I got started. Like everything else, I bring in a little story to help you understand that sometimes the most exciting projects come out of something that's quite unexpected. So I first encountered my step well nearly half a century ago. Okay? Once again, it tells you of how ancient I am. When on a summer vacation, and I was visiting my grandmother in Ahmedabad, the same grandmother that I've been talking about, she arranged for me to join a day-long sightseeing tour of the architectural marvels and the historical sites in and around Ahmedabad. I suspect that she thought that my education was incomplete and I really needed to go around and look at all these things and know Gujarat a little bit more. But it was during the course of that trip that I first visited the step well. It's called the step well of Adalaj, and there are hundreds of step wells dotting Gujarat and Rajasthan. And I was blown away by the unique grandeur and artistic beauty. Can we move on to the next one? Okay. Okay. I just want to show you, I've been talking about Gujarat. You say, she comes from Gujarat. How come she's only working on Gujarat? You see here on the map, the slightly shaded one, Gujarat. You can see Ahmedabad, my hometown, and Rajasthan. And those are the areas you are most likely to see the step wells. And there's a very simple explanation for that. We are in the desert region. Okay, we are in the desert region, and there's a scarcity of water. So it is in these areas that you find wells and step wells that were built in the hundreds, and those are the ones I wanted to study. Many decades later, after this trip that my grandmother pushed me into, I realized, I discovered or learned that a familiar feature of the landscape of Gujarat, the step wells, once numbered in the thousands. wells, okay? And they are still some of them. They provided life-giving water to humans and to animals and enabled the land to become fertile. What was even more intriguing for me was that of the several hundred step wells that have been excavated or were excavated at that time, at least 25%, a quarter, were actually commissioned by women. In other words, they are the patrons of the step wells, queens, royalty, wives of rich merchants, ordinary women, and even some wells that have been built by prostitute and courtesans and servant girls who hope to gain religious merit and possibly immortality through the gift of water. Do you realize that in a parched land, the gift of water is the greatest gift? And if you can have a construct and pay for a step well or a well, then the belief is that you will gain immortality, everlasting life in your next existence. So you have all kinds of women commissioning the gift wells to provide gift of water. Not only did women commission many of the step wells as patrons and donors, they also frequently served as the inspiration for the wells. Steps wells were built, and this is what has always excited me, to honor and were named after sometimes a virtuous wife or a benevolent mother or a local goddess and even a beloved mistress, okay? These were all the women who became the subjects of step wells and for whom step wells were built. As new research is undertaken, it is exciting to envision that more women will emerge as patrons of art and architecture. And women's agency, and that's what we've been talking about for the last 3 days, will receive the attention it deserves. We'll talk about the art of the step well, but I want to suggest at the very outset that the art of the step well honors and celebrates the feminine principle, the creative force in the universe. The goddess in her manifested forms is visible everywhere, and I'm going to show you that. You don't have to believe me until you see it in the step wells, occupying not a servile position, a subordinate position of the Brahmin wife, but a place of preeminence. So here women are center stage. It is not the male gods, it is not male interests, it is woman deities that are important. I think it was also an indication of women's growing power and wealth in society, that you could commission a step well to provide water for hundreds and thousands of people, meant that you had some wealth and that you were generous and benevolent. And people did that because women who commissioned the step wells probably not only wanted to do an act of generosity, they also were striving to place themselves in history's gaze. They wanted to be remembered, okay? And thereby challenge the stereotype of the passivity of women. I'm suggesting that there's women's power involved here, women's agency that's involved here. Women gathered at these step wells to obtain water, but also to appeal to the local goddesses for health, happiness, and children. They performed rituals at the step wells to ensure their own fertility, okay, a major concern for women, but particularly Indian women, to ask for the gift of sons. sadly, they are not asking for daughters. I only wanted daughters, but that's besides the point. To ask the goddess to intercede on their behalf so that milk would flow from their breasts to nurture their newborn. These age old rituals in and around the step wells continue even today. I'm suggesting here that there is out there incredible amount of potential for wonderful original research. And it is up to your generation, the younger generation, to be captivated by a topic that somebody hasn't worked on thoroughly and to come up and create a work that will last for many, many years and will be the inspiration for yet other women to follow your footsteps. The stepwells became a favorite subject in folklore and folk literature. This course is about literature, diasporic women in diasporic experiences and how they are reflected in literature. And the stepwells did the same. They were a favorite subject in folklore. Every step of these stepwells, and I'll explain the stepwell in a minute, yields, gives forth tales of love and betrayal, of courage and sacrifice. And I have attempted in my book to translate some of those songs and some of those folklore, which tell us about the inner lives, the lived experiences of these women whose voices still echo in the now crumbling and dilapidated broken structures. Okay, can we move to the next one? Okay, Gujarat and Rajasthan, let's move to the next. Okay, this is a kind of scene that you still see, which is still quite a familiar scene in Gujarat and Rajasthan. If you go to the countryside, move away from cities and towns where you have tap water, and you go to the countryside or the villages, you see these women with this lovely pots, copper pots, gold-colored pots, on their heads, balanced on their heads, going from their homes to the step well in order to fetch water. I mean, it's something that you don't have to go looking for if you are in the countryside. Next, please. Okay, I'm kind of intrigued by this photograph because, and keep this in mind, there's something unusual in this photograph. They're all carrying pots on their heads, okay? Do you see something that's a little different with one of them? Okay? Okay, what is it? Look at their heads on what's on top in the container, okay? All of the four are, are carrying pots that are silver, whatever. The one in the middle, okay, so the one in the middle is a golden brass pot, okay? And I'm going to suggest that this is not just it. There is incredible amount of beautiful poetry centered around this. And I will, so I'm going to read it out to you because we are on that slide. This is a translation from Gujarati folk song, folklore into English. So the young girl is telling her mother, okay? She's saying, I'm not going to draw water from a copper pot. Look at the copper pots. I'm not going to draw water from a copper pot. Oh, mother, I yearn for a golden one. Okay? And suddenly you discover that there is so much that is exciting in these step wells. But you've got to sort of have a third eye to say, hey, you know, what's going on here? And there are many wonderful The folklore just swept me away. I mean, I was okay. So I will come back to some of these folklore later on. I've translated some of these folklores, as I mentioned. These step wells are unique structures because they were not merely, as I said, utilitarian buildings. People didn't just go for water. They served a dual function, a multiple or a dual function, providing water, but also a site for ritual and propitiation of the local deities. They linked, and this is what again is very exciting. They linked three worlds. When you come to Gujarat, I'll take you on a guided tour of some of the step wells. There are hundreds, which is what I did for my fieldwork. The step wells are steps, they're not like a regular well. In a regular well, you go with your pot, you have a rope, you put the rope into the water and then draw the water out. Not the step wells. They are often multi-storied building, very elaborate if they were built by queens and royalty. All around the step well walls and several floors of them, there is beautiful art and sculptural representation. And so they become like works of art. But if you were to come with me, which I'm going to insist you walk down to the water with me, we go down the steps in the step wells. And finally, at the bottom, after maybe 25 steps, which is darkness, we are underground now in the building, there is water there, and they fetched it from there. But what it did symbolically and otherwise is link three different worlds, okay? The subterranean means that which is under the ground, and the water source is under the ground, right? The earthly, which is our level, and the celestial, which is the heavens and the deities, because around the stepwell walls are the goddesses, the beautiful images of the goddesses. I believe that there is much we can learn by giving a voice to the countless women forgotten and neglected by history, and in doing so, we will have succeeded in some measure in making what I call the invisible visible. The invisible are the women, the forgotten ones, the overlooked ones, the marginalized one. And in going to the step well, we are seeing, to some extent, we are making the invisible visible in a lot of ways. You see the water which is invisible, and then when you go down the steps, you find the water. On the walls, you see the images of the goddesses. So it's a very, very exciting building. Okay, very briefly before I move on, I want to talk about the sanctity of water. You probably know this better than I do because you live in this country, but you know that it goes without saying that water is essential for survival, and from the very beginning of human culture, it has played a vital role in the birth and flowering of civilization. If you're a student of comparative history or civilizations, you would note that the earliest civilizations in the world on the Indus River, Mesopotamia on the Euphrates and the Tigris, and Egypt, okay, or on the Nile River. So water was what gave birth to the very civilizations that we study as the ancient civilizations. So it goes without saying that water is essential for survival, particularly in a dry and arid landscape like that of Gujarat. Water can make the difference between life and death, you know. And as early as the 6th century of the Common Era, inhabitants of this region developed strategies for storing and preserving the water from the annual monsoons by digging deep into the ground to utilize the underground sources of water. And that is the source of water in a step well. And then they build steps leading down to the water. I wish I had time, but I'm cognizant that I have another half hour only. In a parched land, the gift of water is precious, and quenching the thirst of humans and animals was viewed as a meritorious act. It got you merit, it gave you merit. And there are lots of wonderful, I don't have the time for that, in the Vedic tradition, water is said to be endowed with transformative and magical powers. You take a little dip into the water and you will come out beautiful, or you will come out something. So they transform you. There is something magical about it. The Padma Puran, one of the ancient texts, that says, and I won't tell you in Sanskrit, that whoever builds water buildings will enjoy 1,000 years of paradise. Okay? So one who attains all merits by the endowment of water and goes straight to heaven. A very good incentive for people to build step wells. You'll go straight to heaven. Okay, let's start with the images. You are entering a step well here. If you thought knew wells, well, the step well is a very different kind of building. This is the entry to the step well, and you go from one floor down a few steps to the other floor, and then down further to another floor, sometimes as many as 6 or 7 floors. And then once you arrive at the bottom, there is the glimmering, shimmering water for which you have come. So let's move to the next image. Now you're beginning to see some of the intricacies of the step well. I took this in Gujarat at one of the step wells. You see, it's not just a place for water. This is where women's agency comes through. It is also a place where there are columns, beautifully decorated, and you're going to see some of that. And it makes a total amount of sense, because step wells were used not just by women to get water, but the region of Gujarat particularly was a link in trade between the north of India and the south of India, because Gujarat is in the west, okay, when you saw the map. So it was located at the crossroads of trade routes, and from times immemorial, caravans laden with cotton textiles, with silk goods, with indigo dye, with pearls, with carpets, and other goods traveled through the region from the south to the north and so on and so forth, carrying precious cargo bound for distant lands. Merchants in Gujarat, known as Banjaras, traveled long distances with their merchandise and trade goods, loaded on their bullock carts, on their camels. And these travelers often traveled at night, guided by the stars, because in the daytime, Gujarat and Rajasthan are really very hot. Though I have to say Aligarh falls in that rank right now for me. But they traveled by night because night is always cooler, and tried to avoid the fierce midday sun, taking rest for several hours when the sun was blaring and too hot. Where did they take rest? On the floor of the step wells, okay? So they became a place also for merchants and traders. They were not only, so the wells not only provided them with water, the traders and merchants or Banjaras, for them and their animals, but also a cool, dark place where they could avoid the scorching sun and rejuvenate themselves, surrounded by the presence of gods and goddesses. Women pilgrims, okay, a lot of women go on pilgrimage. They too rested here. Traders, as I mentioned, troops on the march, military troops on the march, and royal hunting parties. All of them used the shade and the water. that was provided by the step well. So it was serving a lot of people besides women. The landing platforms, which you'll see in a minute, and you can see some, oh, you can see that, and ornamental galleries decorated with carvings of deities, animals, plant motifs, served as an escape and distraction from their monotonous journeys. These step wells that we call in Gujarati vav, V-A-V, vavs, in contrast to ordinary wells, were elaborate structures, often multi-storied. If you have to see one step well in Gujarat, in India, I would say go to a step well, and I'll take you, called Rani Ni Vav, the stepwell of the Queen stepwell. One of the most, unbelievable 7-storied stepwell with the most incredible artwork around. Elaborate embellishments and decorations are profusely decorated with designs of flowers and vines and leaves and animals on the walls. Thus, I'm going to argue that the stepwells of Gujarat represent a unique form of water architecture. The other day I was talking to some students and I said, what are you studying? And they said, architecture. Well, this is another kind of architecture you need to study, which is both functional, utilitarian in other words, as well as aesthetically beautiful. An examination of these step wells constructed under the patronage of, and this is important, Hindu and Muslim dynasties in Gujarat, both of them patronized and commissioned step wells. So this is an area where you see step wells are bringing together two different religious groups, no matter how different they might be in their beliefs. And they are providing shelter, water, life-giving shade to, and therefore both Hindu and Muslim kings patronized and commissioned the step well. This spirit of assimilation, and we've been talking over and over about assimilation that happens when foreigners, people like myself, go from India to, in my case, America, the struggle to assimilate. But here, you already see in India, 1,000 years ago, a spirit of assimilation which transcended religious differences and sectarian conflicts, Hindu-Muslim unity. Okay, woman in space, and then I'll get to some images. From the very earliest times, in virtually all societies, women have been pushed and relegated and confined to the domestic realm. Yesterday, in one of the lectures, we talked about the private versus the public, right? And women, sadly, are always pushed into the private realm. And this is true of India. While men's activities, traditionally and even today, sadly, link them to the public realm. And you know why it is very important for women to move out of the domestic into the public? Because if you want power, if you want to assert your identity, if you want to have an influence, you better not just be taking care of the children and cooking and cleaning and washing and taking care of the home and the husband and the family. Move out into the public. And you people are poised to do that. You are getting degrees. So you have, some of you already have degrees. It is incumbent upon you to move out someday. You don't have to move out. I'm married, I'm a mother, I'm a wife. My identity partially is that of a mother and wife. But I'm also now a retired, but college professor. And it is when I moved into the public realm, when I left the home to teach in a public space, that I suddenly discovered myself, my own potential. And I would very much want you to keep that in mind. For women particularly, you do need to. And is it just that it is a means to exercise power? I think not. The other advantage of moving from the domestic to the public is that when you move into the public realm, You are establishing cross-cutting networks of support. In this case, women going to the well to get water are getting the support of other women. And that's very important. You know how girlfriends are important to all of us, you know. When we want to cry on somebody's shoulder, I want to give a personal example, but I won't today, okay? Anyway, it is always the women, other friends who are women, that we find it so much easier to cry on their shoulders. So it is a way, if you can establish a support system. And for women from the villages who went to fetch water, finally, they are getting out of the domestic space. All the cooking and the washing and taking care of husband and children and all the work, all of which might be beneficial, all of which are important, but they're moving into the public realm and they're discovering other friends. They are talking. At the well, they're not only filling water in their pots, in their golden or copper pots, they are talking about their sorrows and their grief. They are talking about their joys and their pleasures. I don't know if I can say that here. They're also talking about their lives and the young man that they are in love with, but don't know how to proceed with that because we are talking a conservative society often. They are talking about all the misery, the alienation, leaving their village and going to a new place to marry the husband or whatever, or the exploitation. I'm, I'm suggesting that moving into a public domain enable these women to escape for 1 hour in the day or even less, maybe 45 minutes when they went to the well, to escape the oppression, the boredom of their daily lives, the exploitation and restrictions that they experienced in a deeply patriarchal society, which is, of course, ours also, which is most societies. So when my husband called me up yesterday and said, are you okay? You're working very hard? I told him, I said, I am so happy because I'm doing nothing. Dr. Fareed is providing me with food and hospitality. My students are smiling. Nobody is scowling at me. No screaming children. I don't have now. She's grown up. It's a liberation, you know. I don't mean to put down all the joys of motherhood and wifehood, but there is a different kind of pleasure of being with friends, of finding your space, of sharing your joys. Okay? So the women, and women generally lack in every society. Don't think it's only our own society. They lack spatial and psychological space. You may have more rooms in your house in America, but the psychological space often confines a woman, okay? I mean, not every woman feels that, but the stepwells offered them that space where they came to laugh and cry, to share their joys and sorrows, as I've said, to while away, waste away an hour or two. They lingered at the stepwell, not because they were fetching water for that long, but because they just wanted to be in the company of other friends. The songs and folklore emanating from these encounters provide a glimpse into the inner lives of women in a gendered society, in a male-dominant society about which we know so little. They came here to restore order in their universe. When you're going crazy, you go to the stepwells in the cool place, shade of the stepwells. You have friends who are laughing and talking. You fetch water. You're surrounded by goddesses on the walls and beautiful carvings. And you go away from that space, rejuvenated, revived, once again dealing with your daily responsibility. Let me, so the section, and I have no time, so I have to, I'm cognizant of the time. In my book, I have a whole long chapter called Voices from the Deep. You understand? It's the songs and the narratives of the women from underground, from the stepwells themselves. So they served as inspiration for countless songs and poems. And it was so thrilling for me. Why did nobody ever, why did my professors in Delhi University never tell me about stepwells? I'm still angry with them. I worked under some of the greatest professors, but how come nobody talked about this woman's space? So the stepwells led to often also, I just want to suggest, as I mentioned earlier, to chance encounters. Okay, we lived in a deeply patriarchal society. In a conservative society, a woman cannot develop liaisons with menfolk. Okay, but when they are walking a mile and a half or two from their home alone to the stepwell, they very well might encounter a young man every day, and then he waits for her, and then she thinks she's in love with him, and there are songs that come out of it. So I'm going to have you relax a little bit and listen to me, because I want you to know that this is so exciting as a woman's space. So I'm again translating into English, and it doesn't do an adequate job. The young girl says, and I quote, "How can I go to fetch water? Oh, friend of mine." She's telling her girlfriend, "How can I go to fetch water? Oh, friend of mine, how can I go to fetch water?" A stranger standing at the steps of the well made me bashful. I lost control, okay? And lose all control. A stranger standing at the steps of the well made me bashful and lose all control. How can I go to fetch water, my dear friend? Okay, this is a call of a woman who's pretty desperate, but I mean, what's she going to do? Okay, can we? This is Rani Ki Vav, 7-storied. It is now they are renovating it, and I was pushing the archaeological survey. I said, do it fast, but at least some of it looks like that. Can we move to the next slide? Okay, this is the north wall of Rani Ki Vav. So if you think you are just going to a hole in the ground when we talk about stepwells, forget that. What you are going to see, and this is of course one of the better ones, walls and walls of carvings like this. Okay? So thrilling. I mean, people go to temples. Why don't they ask me? I'll say first go to stepwells. The art there is equally beautiful. And if you're a woman, you will prefer this art because there are very few male gods on the walls. You know who is depicted? Female deities, devis, goddesses, plants, animals, flowers, vines. So in some ways, this is very much a woman's space. With and at the top you will see a lot of apsaras, celestial maidens. Fewer men. There occasionally poor Vishnu is brought in. Occasionally there's Brahma. Occasionally there's Shiva. But center stage is female goddesses like Devi. Can we move on? Just one jali there. I mean, this is a work of art, and it is 800 years old. And look at the intricate work there. And this is just one part of it. So they are really worth all right, can we move? Another one in the wall. I mean, I just got blown away. Later, if we have time, I'll tell you a story about it, but I'm seeing Dr. Sadaf and I'm taking care of it. Okay, she's doing nothing. It's innerly motivated fear of the boss. Okay, let's move on. Okay. Ah, in Rani Ki Vav, all of these are from Rani Ki Vav. You see the Apsara on the right, and you see the Apsara on the left. I just wanted to, because nobody is going to tell you that everything is going to fly off. Uh, Snake, I'm glad you could see it. The snake climbing up the leg of the woman. Okay? And on top are the three owls. Okay, what do you think owls represent? Do you have any, in any culture, do they represent anything? Night, but also wisdom. Okay? Also wisdom. And the, huh. Oh, sorry. Here, talk here. Okay, I'll be careful. So she's, and in her hand, she's got a plate. If you look at her right hand, she's got a plate, and the snake is trying to get, on the plate is a fish. See, it is these details that people miss. She's got a fish there, and the snake is trying to get at the fish, and she's got her hand out, ready to hit the snake because she doesn't want it to eat up the fish. Varaha, again in the middle. Look at what is below Varaha. Varaha, the deity, is standing on a pedestal where there is a Nag and a Nagini, the snake prince and the snake princess. Okay? What wonderful details done 700 years or more. And you see the Baraha's nose. Can you see his nose? There seems to be a female figure on top, sitting perched up on his arm, left arm, and she's doing something to his nose. She's just playing with it. And that is the goddess Ganges. So there's something playful, there's wonderful, but you have, somebody has to interpret the art before we discover the magic in it. Okay, let's move again. Okay, here, oh, I love this one. I wish there was more darkness here, but it's called The Maiden with the Swan. This woman has just come out of her bath. She has long black hair, unlike myself, and she's squeezing it, taking the water out of it, okay, because she just washed her hair. And the swan near her thighs, near her legs, reaches out to the dripping drops of water. You know what swans like? They like pearls. And the swans, when the water drips from her hair, thinks it's pearls. So, what beautiful imagination and imaginary things. Things that we wouldn't think about unless somebody. And so the swan is standing there trying to grab at some drops of water while she's squeezing it, thinking they are bits of pearls which they like. Okay, I'm going to move on there, and then let's see if we can see some more images. A popular song again, there's a region called Kheralu region, don't worry about it. Um, Area focuses on a particular theme, and I'm translating again from Gujarati into English. She says, the young girl at the stepwell says, I'm coming fast with the water pot filled with water. Oh, Ranna Day. Okay, Ranna Day is a goddess, and she is regarded in Hinduism as the wife of the sun, S-U-N, god. Okay, Ranna Day. So she is a deity. So the girl says, I'm coming fast with the water pot filled with water. Oh, Ranna Day, please, please give me the one who would pull me by the skirt. Okay. What do you think she's saying? Who would be the one to pull her by her ghagra or her skirt? Can you think? Whom does she want so desperately that she's asking the goddess? Yeah, loudly? Child? Of course. Absolutely. Something close. So she's appealing to the goddess and saying, please, please, give me the one who will pull me by the skirt. So obviously she hasn't had children and she's going to the goddess. How sensitive can poetry be? And oh mother, she goes on, and that's the last line there. Oh mother, the taunts of childlessness are unbearable. She says she's being teased because she has no children, and she's pleading to Rannade to give her that child. Otherwise, everybody is teasing her. I'm coming fast with the water pot filled with water. Oh, Rannade, please give me the one who would pull me by the skirt. Oh, mother, the taunts of childlessness are unbearable. This deals with a common theme because I think no humiliation in at least India of the past was greater than the curse of barrenness, of not being able to produce a child. Okay, another love story. I know you're young, so you are at that age. The song goes, the rope, she's now talking about the rope that's going to be dropped in the water. The rope is 40 arms length long. It's a huge, long rope, but could not reach the water while waiting for the beloved one. The day, after all, is about to end. This is a very somber, sad one where she's waiting all day for her beloved, okay? And she puts the rope in, she throws it down there, but it doesn't reach the water. And she's waiting for her beloved. Some of them are really heartbreakingly, okay. Another one, a theme that you would be familiar with in any culture, the terror of the mother-in-law. The mother-in-law is, I don't have a son, so thankfully I don't have the position of a mother-in-law, and I'm just happy. The terror of the mother-in-law and the scarcity of water in the Wagad region is reflected in the following. I just want you to enjoy. You know, poetry is about learning in a different way. Oh, grandfather. She's calling her grandfather in another village. Kindly do not give your daughters like me in marriage to somebody in the Wagad region. The quarrelsome mother-in-law of Wagad is difficult to deal with. Oh, grandfather, she makes me grind corn during the day and spin during the night. She got a pretty awful mother-in-law. She makes me grind corn during the day and spin during the night, sends me to fetch water late at night prior to the break of dawn, oh grandfather. And then she says, the last paragraph is just sad. The pitcher sinks not, since the rope reaches not the water. Either there is no water in the well or whatever. The sun has arisen and set. So from morning to night, she's trying to get water. The sun has arisen and set on the bank of the well. Oh, flying birds. She's sending a message to her grandfather in another village through the medium of the flying birds who are there. She says, oh, flying birds, take my message to my grandfather that your grandfather, that your granddaughter has fallen into the well. She commits suicide. You know, I found that even now, sadly, but certainly in the past, for women who had no other means to take their lives, who had desperate lives and wanted to end it, they jumped into the step well. So this is a reflection of some sad reality. Okay, I'm going to move on. Let's move on and see. Another one, lovely one. Look at the mangoes hanging there. See the parrot or some kind, yeah, the maiden with the parrot. And she's looking, her expression, you got to believe me because it's very old. She's looking lovingly at the parrot. Equally, the parrot is looking up to her with the same kind of affection and love that a child would give to a mother. So these are themes that are so close to women's heart, and they are on the walls of the stepwells. Okay, next one, please. Monkey. I mean, all kinds of playful themes. In Ahmedabad, where I stay, there are a lot of monkeys, and I'm terrified. This one's, luckily, I'm not in that position, but they are climbing up her legs, and she's trying to ward it off. Next one. Again, um, there was something I wanted. Okay, let's move. Ah, goddesses. No god here, no Hindu male god. This is um, Shakti, okay? And it is from a mythological story where she slays the demon. And it is a very important theme in ancient in Indian religion. Um, okay, and look at the intricate work there. Um, the woman on the right, the Apsara, is looking at something, a mirror to, and admiring her beauty. And I think that's wonderfully energizing also, okay, that she thinks she is beautiful. Um, and of course, the other one is busy trying to ward off the monkeys. What happened to the stepwells, okay? I've got 1 minute, 2 minutes. Um, it, with coming of the British, these wonderful stepwells that represent the finest examples of water architecture ceased to be built after the establishment of British rule in India in the 19th century. The British, who were our rulers, viewed the stepwells with horror and disdain. They regarded the waters in these wells as unclean, unhygienic, and a source of potential hazardous infections. So they sealed them up. You could not go to the stepwells anymore for water. They imposed regulations and prohibited the use of stepwells for drinking water. Did the women just take it sitting down? No, they were not. Remember, these are also poor women, but they are empowered. So after the British who had this ruling, the women could not go to fetch water, but next to the step wells, they built a little shrine to a goddess. And they would come there, they would gather there again as a space to get together with other women and do all the rituals, all the things, all the sharing of joys and sorrows, except that they didn't go down to the water. So I found that some of the step wells, by the way, at one point in Ahmedabad, one of the step wells was used for a jazz festival, which was a combination of jazz with classical Indian music. And I can't tell you, I was blown away the middle of at midnight with 1,000 people sitting there with all these wonderful carvings. One could hear the sounds of Man Bhatt and a jazz group. So they're being used for different purposes. Okay, I want to argue that the animals on the walls of the stepwells, the birds on the stepwells, the apsaras are pretty much forgotten, but the animals haven't gone. Now the stepwells are taken over by snakes and serpents, by tortoise and fish in the water, and so nature still lives in the stepwells the way it used to in the walls of the stepwells. And women have revived them. Okay, one couple quick images, and then okay. Just one thing. If you thought that you are the only ones who put on lipstick, I always tell my American students, forget it. I want to argue that she's putting on something. I don't think so. But with my American students, I like to push them into believing that they are not the creators of lipstick. It is my woman here who's doing it 800 years back. Let's move. Okay, again, admiring, arranging her earring on the left, as you probably do in your homes. Lovely images, sculptural images. This is what the stepwell, the water looks like. It's dirty, it's unhygienic, because they've been sealed off. They were not like this before the British sealed them off. And, it's very sad to see them because now they have become the abode of flies and mosquitoes and, say, snakes and turtles. But they are there, and I hope they will be revived. Okay, okay. I am going to sit down. Thank you very much. We are done. Thank you very much. Okay. My friend Maisha here says, look at this. This is the new goddess that is occupying the stepwells after people were forbidden to go into the stepwell. On next to it, they built crude images, paintings of the goddess, but nevertheless she's there, and they come to gossip and cry and laugh just next to it. Yeah, next to it. Okay, and this is how they decorate her. Gold and tinsel, marigold and flowers. Still very exciting, not the same quality of sculptures. Next. Uh, they still come to do rituals. When they finish the rituals by asking goddesses for children, for sons, and whatever, somebody who could pull their skirt, the water with which they use for the ritual, once the ritual is over, they throw the pots there. So I was taken by this photograph and wanted very badly to show that in some ways it is still woman's space, sadly very different. Okay, time for me to sit down, and thank you very much, Maisha. Thank you. Okay. I have been told, as I said yesterday, that I have a watchwoman here guarding us, looking. Okay, I better sit down. My esteemed colleague here has told me that the requirement of the grant is that students must participate, and I agree with that. Easier said than done sometimes, but and she had said, I said, what if the students stay quiet? What if they are falling asleep because they are bored or tired or hungry or some other reason? And she said, it's for you to ask questions of the students and them too. So please, please save me from asking questions, and you talk about anything relating to the topic for today. Please, go ahead. I've got a whole list of questions ready, but my preference would be for you to ask the question. Okay. Yes, please. Go, go. Oh, excuse me, Maisha. My friend here needs a mic, or she should come to the. Can we have them, or are they going to be too shy to come here and use this mic, so you don't have to run around?
It's okay. This is
Okay, okay, okay. I'm not going to micromanage. All right, go
Yeah.
ahead.
So my question is like, as we have seen that uh, to like step well was a kind of opportunity that women of that period, they tried to seek that agency, free space, right? So when you like went to the US, did you observe any such spaces over there that women used to seek their own agency
Wow.
in a way?
Difficult question. I know that. Firstly, of course, there are women's colleges. Remember, I chose often to teach in a women's college because it was women's space and I could hang out with women. Huh? Not always, but yeah. The other, little more shady, is that if women after work want to go to a bar or want to go to a restaurant, or while their husbands are still at home or at work, hopefully, this is their space also. There are, but the stepwells are particularly, there is a clarity there in terms of space, partly because the women don't have other spaces, right? In America, I think you have more space to talk, gossip, bitch about, share pain and anguish and this and that, but less so in India, where there women from rural areas, arranged marriage, it felt isolated often.
I just want to add one thing, that I too belong to a village area, rural area, and from my childhood memories, I remember that women used to carry not water exactly, but some like what we say, like guttery kind of thing, like for grass. They used to carry grass
Okay.
on their heads, and sometimes that cow down,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
uh, in some baskets. So uh, they used to get space during that time, and I have seen that they used to talk for long, carrying like weight of more than 10
Yeah,
kgs.
yeah, yeah.
So, and they used to talk and share their daily things and all. So what I feel that was also kind of like, space which they used to enjoy. So
Totally.
yeah.
By the way, I'm so glad you brought that point up because I think it is worth for us to think about. Now, in East Africa and in South Africa, when the Indian migrants went there, the chalk, all of you are familiar with the word chalk, chalky or chalk. It's the courtyard outside the kitchen, just outside the house. The chauka, okay? The chauka becomes the space where sara kaam din ka ho jaye. Then the girlfriends, after finishing all the domestic chores, वो लोग आके ज़मीन पर बैठते हैं और गपशप करते हैं. That is woman's space. And I think, one could write a short story on that. One could really incorporate that in the ways that I'm trying to do with the stepwell. But it's worth. So keep that in mind, everybody, that for the woman who doesn't go outside too much.
When they used to wash clothes also near the river,
Absolutely. So the excellent, because these are the areas where they are without their men folk. Okay, जब कपड़े धोने जाते हैं नदी. Absolutely. I think that's a very good point. I hope everybody it has registered. Okay, more questions. Huh? What is he saying? No, no, I want to hear. This is a public space. We are all insisting we want to know. Okay, more questions? Other questions before I? Yes, please, please.
Yes, so as I was listening to the folklores and the translation of the folk literature, it just reminded me, it might be, I mean, it's just, something that I was reminded of. It might have no connection to this, the formulation of this poetry, but the way the lovers are described, it also reminds me of Vaishnav Padavali, like Radha Krishna, that connotation, it just comes to my mind. And then, like as she pointed out, that rivers and staples, water bodies as these spaces of,
Totally.
meeting with your beloved. So
You're very right. You must. These are things that's the whole purpose of a workshop like this. We pick up little bits and pieces and say, oh my God, 5 years from now, I had seen Stepwells when I was a little girl, when my grandmother pushing me into getting a little knowledgeable about Gujarati culture. It took until I was, God knows, in my 40s, when I decided, oh, this is an area nobody's written a book on. And it came, and I have other books, but this is the one that gets read most of all. And I was telling Dr. Fareed that before I leave Aligarh, and I will leave with so many sad feelings because I'm having a good time, as you can see. I will leave at least two of my books, the African diaspora in India, which is about the Siddhis, and this one, which is the Stepwell book, so that it's or the library can order it. She said immediately that the library would order it, so that someday, if you have a little time, you go to it and let get inspired to work on it. Huh? And things just happen. Now, when I was working on the step, when I got this idea, I mean, it's like a epiphany. I was in California as a scholar in residence at a women's college. And I said, ab main grant kaise do? I got to go from US to India if somebody paid for me. So I was going to apply for a scholarship. And I was sitting, I had a visitor who was actually my husband's first real good friend in America. He's an American, I want to say he is, no, he's passed away, but he was an American, but from a Venezuelan, South American, Chilean background. And he lived in California, and he came to visit me when I was in California. And he said, what are you busy with, Purnima, now? And I said, I'm dreaming of a new book. But I'm not a great photographer. Actually, I'm not. I take photographs now. He said, I'll come. I said, मेरे पास तो पैसे नहीं है, मैं तुम्हें क्या दे सकती हूँ? I said, all that I can do is my grandmother's home is there. You can come for as long as you and I need to run around looking at all the step wells. You come, stay there free, eat with us, my husband and myself, and the three of us, I will hire a taxi and we will go and you take the photographs. Now, the sad story about that is that he finished taking the images and he got cancer. And he didn't live to see this book, which I have dedicated to him, because by the time it came out, Zuban published it in India. And I wanted an Indian publisher to publish it. There were any number of American publishers, but my heart said, this is a book for Indian women before it is for American women. Well, he didn't make it. But so good things happen. And, he's not around, but I'm sure wherever his soul is, he's happy that there's a book out with his images, And I've dedicated the book partially. Yeah. Okay, another question, please. Comment, जो भी हो.
One more observation that, like, I won't say that ancient time, I mean quite some time, like more than 20, 30 years back, women used to share that community feeling and they used to share spaces while in a group, right? With some other friends and all. But nowadays, women want her free space alone, individual space. So, like that change, I can see that me time and individual space. But earlier it was like a group of women, they used to share the space, right? And one more observation that rituals. There was a ritual that when there was a marriage and that barat goes. After that, women used to not join gathering. They used to be like back at home, and there they used to perform some performances when they are playing the roles of their male counterparts, and they they used to enjoy that freedom and the patriarchal rules and everything. So this kind of thing also we have noticed. Like they used to enjoy their space, that no male member is there, so they fit into the males part.
Absolutely. I think that women, particularly cloistered in their homes, I think it is changing with modern India also, but it's changing slowly. I still love to hang out with other women.
But new generation, they want individual space.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. But it is a very precious thing to be able to share your joys and sorrows and laugh and cry with another friend who's a female. As men do, they do gupshup also. We people don't have the spaces, so we have to create our own spaces. Okay, Any other questions?
After marriage, we feel patriarchy more and we enjoy that space more. What I feel.
By the way, no, I agree 100%. I just will get booted out of Aligarh if I push for women's liberation. No, I think that's very true. That women actually, not just India, everywhere, feel a little constrained. It's partly because they carry a dual burden, no? At least in the West. You do Naukri too, 8 hours, 9 hours, you're slogging away outside of the home. You come home and mostly who's going to do the cooking? Who's going to take care of the children? When the child screams heaven and hell, who's going to try to console the child? We still are, we are really, we meaning women, are carrying a dual burden, a multiple burden, and that has to change. And it does come because I myself believe that there are a lot of sensitive, good men who would understand the need for equality, gender equality. Sometimes you have to give them a little nudge because they don't realize. I mean, patriarchy is so entrenched in human society. But once you do that, it allows for a very wonderful friendship and a companionship because you're sharing everything, right? So I think that's very true. It takes time. It's not going to happen overnight. So I don't want to suggest that this is a change that is going to take place very quickly. Your, my daughter, for example, but then of course that case is a little different, has so much, enjoys so much more freedom than I did. I'm an Indian woman. I grew up here. I was born here. I lived the first 22 years here. But she enjoys far more freedom, some of which I don't want to know about, okay? Because I don't. I mean, it's just as well that as a mother, I don't know what's going on sometimes. She's an adult. But you're absolutely right that in patriarchies, and you mustn't think it is only India or traditional societies or South Asian societies. There are different forms of patriarchy very much alive in the West. You know, if a woman rises to the top ranks, there is some resentment, some envy by the male folks also, even in the US. But it's rare, it's slowly fading because there is an awareness that that is equally the responsibility of male and female. And that's very, and that's why, you know, I've always, people ask me, how is it? I went to a co-educational school, elementary, middle, and high school in Delhi. So I was not used to going in an all-exclusive girls' institution. Something happened when I came to college age. And Delhi University, Miranda House, a women's college, gave me a certain, you know, I like debating. I know, and now it seems so long ago. But it is not this what I wanted to do. I don't know where this all came in my life. I wanted to debate. I wanted to do dramatics. I wanted to play in, take part in university plays, which I did. Um, and but it, being in a women's college really made a difference for me. Okay, I learned that I could be anything, I could do anything, I could become anything, and it's a and the other is role models. I will not say I have my esteemed colleague here, but for a woman to have a role model who is a female can make a lot of difference in India. I mentioned yesterday Ramila Thapar, who changed my life. All she needed to do was to write a letter for me, and every door, every university opened its doors for me. Right? So, women supporting other women. And you people must remember that, well, of course, men are very good. Of course, they will do kind and good things for you. But remember to do things for other women because they have been deprived of it, historically at least. Huh? Okay, any other? I have to, Sada, I'm losing track. Uh, I attribute it either to jet lag or to lack of food. I haven't had my samosa, which I will in a few minutes. When did I start and when should I stop? I started half an hour back. Okay, we've got. He said I want time. You want time. Okay, she's got a grant. I don't have to worry about a grant being administered. Please ask questions so Dr. Farid will not think that I betrayed you. I like to tease her. It's called a teasing relationship. Bolo, where's the mic? Where's the
Can
mic?
I ask first?
Okay.
Uh, Good evening, ma'am.
Ha, bolo.
Ma'am, as you mentioned in your presentation that folk songs and folklores that were sung by women were used to foster communities and agencies and establish their agencies. Are these folklores and folk songs still sung in contemporary times, and how they have formed the identity of women if they are still practiced today?
Okay, so I said I was talking, doing
Are they,
samosa
are they
talk
still
at
in
that
practice?
point. What the question is it a comment or a question?
It's a question.
And please,
May I repeat?
please repeat.
Ma'am, as you have mentioned in your is it clear?
Now I can hear you. Please.
As you have mentioned in your presentation that the folklores and folk songs that were sung by women were used to nurture the communities and establish their identities. Are those folk songs still sung in contemporary times, and how they have established the identity of women?
Okay. Okay, I can answer partially. I don't know if I have the full answer to it. The stepwells are gone. Okay, from British time onwards, they are there now, but they are historical monuments. The water is dirty; you can't go there for water. But they are still a meeting place for women outside on adjacent. I showed you some sort of rough images of devis. Um, so I think it's very true that they are still going there, but they are also finding, and fewer women are going for water, right? I mean, with modern India, with the installation of tube wells and taps and water, running water, there's less need to go there. So somebody in the audience talked about in the villages when they don't have too much water, they go to the river, the nearest lake, to wash the clothes. I haven't done any study of them, but I would imagine the same thing is going on there, okay? Because you are there for 35, 40 minutes. You may as well take more time, less time to look after the kids and do the cooking, and more time to have a little fun. And I think there would be. And those are the kinds of things you have to unearth. You have to figure out, how do I really study that? Now, it isn't easy. I don't want to suggest for a minute that it's easy. My Gujarati was less than perfect. I grew up in a Hindi-speaking town. But you get help. You talk to people who know it better. You prod and poke and beg and cry and ask somebody who knows Gujarati better, and you sit down with them and you have them, you make sure that your translation, because mine is all in English, okay, not in Gujarati also. So I think it's difficult, but I'd love to. I'd love for our students to chart out some new adventurous path, because there's a lot to do. It's only that somebody has to sometimes guide you. I must say that nobody particularly guided me, but you have to be excited. The most important thing is you have to feel a passion for a subject, whatever that subject is. And the more you work on women, the happier, at least I am, but the happier the world will be. Because really, women have been left out in history. And it's about time that we find our own space in history. Okay? So that's a very good point.
Ma'am, have these folk songs been adapted by various regions in Gujarat and Rajasthan?
Absolutely. You can hear them. There may be collections of folk songs. I wish I had, can you imagine? I don't have a single collection of folk songs. Um, and I did my work many years ago. Now it's become a thing of the past. I'm now just enjoying the popularity of the book and loving it when I'm invited to talk about it, because of all the other topics, others are historical, somewhat dry. This one is close to my heart. It's about women. It's about women's solidarity. It's about women's identities. It's about women carving out a space for themselves. And how exciting can that be? I mean, and this is not anti-male. Last night I thought I was getting this sleepless night worrying. I said, what about the men in the classroom? Are they going to hate me or throw things at me? But it's not an anti-male thing. It is simply filling the gap which needs to be filled to remind people that history is about men and women. And we need to make sure that hole there, that shortcoming, the marginalization of women is taken care of. That, and we will do it if nobody else will do it. Thank you. Other questions? Yes, please. Good, good. Have the questions coming. Otherwise, the questions will be darting from my side under orders.
Okay, so it's not exactly a question. Since you were discussing, the stepwell thing, so I wanted to inform, since I worked it and one of my professors helped me with that. I am recently working on one of such kind of places where women enjoy their womanhood. We do not generally discuss the Western UP, but that's from where I come. So I have read some of my grandmother's work. So this is a culture that I want people to know. That was the Jhula culture that used to exist at the time of my grandmother, and this was when Sawan used to arrive and women used to sit below the trees and they used to write songs for the monsoon and they used to sing it and they used to celebrate womanhood. And when I read my grandmother's work, the poetries that she crafted with her friends at that time, most of them have passed away, and she longs for, whenever I have a chat with her, she longs for the time that she has spent there. So it is generally about alienation that women faced at that time, and a sense of you know not belonging to the patriarchal society that existed at that time. That was more towards connection with God and asking God for a space, a room of their own. So yeah, that's what I feel, that sometimes these cultures like the Jhula culture, I don't know, a lot of people might not be knowing about that. So yeah, I had to visit places and my grandmother's friend to just collect some information. And then I came across one more culture that's known as Rukhsati. The Rukhsati culture. It's a Muslim culture, predominantly Muslim farewell culture. But you see how patriarchy has changed the entire narrative, and the Rukhsatis we know in Bollywood is about the farewell that the fathers are bidding. For example, Babul ki duaein leti ja and things. But actually, the Rukhsati was something that friends, the female friends, used to write for other women and sometimes mother, but mostly friends and cousins. That's when I read my grandmother's Rukhsati, her friend's Rukhsati, and those were all that her friends used to write. And that was a thing in the women, that they used to write farewell songs, because of course there was no technology, no phones. So that was it. That was the end of the era. And a lot of my grandmother's friends have moved. They have, they are victims of this diaspora. They have moved to Pakistan, then they moved to US and Canada, and she's not able to, meet them and things. So that Rukhsati was like the end, the farewell, the last piece of memory she has of her friends. So that was one thing that I want, and I presented that at Miranda. So yeah, and they really like that. Yeah. So that was one thing I wanted to.
I think that's an excellent point, the Jhula culture. And I totally, and it's not only in the realm of folk music or folklore. I think, you know, women artists, for example, and I grew up in Delhi. Grew up when I was a young woman. Uh, every one of them except for me. So I've always felt a little lonely here or deprived. became a well-known artist, you know, because they were all doing painting, and I was into debate or dramatics or whatever. But I think again we might want to also, it would be wonderful to talk to, interview women artists. You know, what is the subject matter of their art? Is it growing out of? Is it inspired by? Is it, does it come out of womanly concerns? So I think that's it, and it would be so exciting, even if you don't initially publish a book, and book doesn't matter. You know, my first book was not, I didn't think it was worthy of publication. It was a translation of an autobiography of my grandmother. But can you believe it was first picked up in by somebody, a publisher in Spain, who got it translated into Spanish, and so that was published in Spanish before it was ever published by Zuban in English. But I think little projects flower into really profoundly important things. So you must do that. If something captures your imagination, and when I say you, I mean everyone in this room, don't let it go. Try to pursue it, because that kind of passion, it's not about academic achievement. It's about fulfilling yourself and actually self-discovery. It's a journey of self-discovery. So I'm very, very happy that, and you know, I would like for you people to carry some of, not because I said this to you, because we are saying this to each other and thinking about and reflecting what it is that we want to be doing. So it's very, very good. I know not everybody talks in the class, but I'm very energized by the level of involvement of the students here. I don't recall that in Miranda House they were as talkative in the classroom. I really, times have changed. 50 years is a lot of, not 50, 60 years when I was teaching. But, you know, it's very nice to see young women, to for them to get immersed into something that's meaningful to them. And it's never meant to exclude men. It is together a journey, but it enriches everybody. So it's really, really nice. Yeah.
We see that this is our time, right? So, in the earlier times, like the girls after their marriage, during the first savan, they used to come back to their like mother's home back, and all the girls of the village, they used to gather somewhere, and they used to discuss about the patriarchal things they are now experiencing after marriage. So in that way also they used to share their pains, sufferings, like new experiences. So like, and for hours, for long hours they used to discuss all these things, but nowadays these things are missing. And I think like those spaces are no more there, and that's why the agony, the pain is somehow suppressed. Due to that, women is more depressed because they are not able to, talk about it, about these little things. They don't have time also, and space as well.
Because
Which,
families are becoming nuclear and women are going out to work, so
yeah,
they
yeah.
don't have space at all.
This is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there
That
are
in the,
multiple factors,
yeah,
but you're absolutely right. Nuclear family also changes a lot of
yes.
things. You know, I'm a product of that. I mean,
So what I feel that in the earlier times, in a way, we can say that they have more space, or like agency in that way. In that way, not in like in a group they used to share.
are there other comments? You know, remember there is no stupid comment. If you feel you want to share with everybody, feel free to do so. Sada, what I lose track of time. Kya time? What is the time frame? Like how much so that I keep. Did I start at 5? No, 6. 5 with the lecture. Okay, we do. I know I'm seeing tiredness on the faces of people, but other questions, other comments, other whatever. Is there anything else? Um, okay, let me ask you this. Do you people feel that our discussion the last, today's the fourth day, last 3 days or 3.5 days, our discussion of women's diasporic experiences, all the things we talked about, trying to make space for themselves, often having a third space, a hybrid in between, neither here nor there, because you've left your village or you left your hometown and gone to a new country or a new place. Do you feel that something like a discussion we've had today, or even the images, or even what I shared with you, can be fitted into the discourse we're doing, into our discussion of diasporic. What I was hoping you will also get is that, and Dr. Rahman very rightly, and I'm glad he came before me, talked about migration. Okay, what I think is happening in our case here today is to some extent more, it approximates the movement, the migration of women from their village, from the familiar place that they grew up in, to the husband's home, or any kind of move to the husband's place. I think it has similarities with loneliness, the nostalgia, alienation, you name it, all the things we talk about. Yeah, and so we want to maybe broaden the definition of diasporic experiences to bring in other kinds of movements. Um, you know, workers, day workers, they're going back to their huts and everything, but if they are construction workers, they're also, are they going through sometimes similar emotions of feeling lonely, of feeling estranged, of feeling like outsiders, occupying no space or some other space? So I think these are very important to just think about them. It may or may not apply, but whether this really counts as diasporic experiences. But I wanted, I mean, there was no reason for me to bring in. There could be other things I could. But I thought that the themes are the same, right? Of loneliness. And songs are about mother-in-law and about loneliness and about husband's cruelty, about, we didn't even go into any poetry, physical violence, abuse suffered by immigrant women. Men are, or men folk oftentimes are stressed out, new environment, they're going through adjustments too, and those circumstances are circumstances ripe for inflicting some big or small cruelty on women. And I always worry, I mean, we talked briefly today, I think Dr. Rahman mentioned this, the Gulf countries. A lot of the women who do temporary migration from Kerala and from the south, and to, as ayahs and nannies and caretakers, cannot go with their husbands. They leave behind their children with their mother's mother-in-law, the husband left behind. Yes, they make money, they remit money, they come back after, but the policies, and he talked about the need for government policies, social justice, in equity, the need for fairness. These countries of the Gulf have the guest worker program. They're not going to allow you to stay more than whatever the required time. Kafala system, they have some term for. And I think it would be lovely for somebody to go. I travel back and forth via the Gulf when I come to the US, but I'm so desperate. My nostalgia for coming to Ahmedabad in India is so great that I don't want to spend weeks and months in Middle East trying to. But those who live closer actually someday could do a really wonderful study of face to face interviews, jotting down, recording the concerns of the women who go. How lonely do they feel? How do they manage? How unfair, by the way. I mean, how brutally cruel is it for they must feel for Gulf countries to have these women look after their children, a sheikh or a rich person in Dubai or whatever, United Arab Emirates or Oman or whatever. You have somebody from the south, a poor woman, who comes and takes care of your children. What about how anguished must she be for her own children, whom she could not bring? But they don't allow, mostly do not allow citizenship the way some of the Western countries. And Western countries are tightening up also. I'm seeing, and under the present new administration in the U.S., they don't like migrants. Okay, that formal policies are anti-white, anti-non-white, anti-immigrant, anti-justice, against equities, against. So there's a lot going on, and these things are in a pendulum. But I think it would be wonderful to have a good study of the women working in the Gulf, single, they're leaving behind their families in the home. And I think that's a ripe area for some very good field work research. Okay. I can't. Where did she go? Any questions? I'm waiting for the clock. Yes, please. Save my life. I'm tired too.
um, as you were speaking about the unfairness, uh, this comes to my mind that of all the feelings a woman who is migrating out of her own volition or not, of all the feelings that she goes through, I think guilt is something that is inherent. Even if she is just going to her husband's house from one village to another, it's there because firstly she knows she'll be constantly being compared to other women and people and women who are all migrating for work, who are going out, who know that I want to become independent, I want to explore my life, and that's why I'm going out. Yet they feel this sense of guilt that I am not here for my parents and I'm leaving my ailing parents behind. Whereas if the same happens with a guy, then that guy and the family of and the family and the entire society will be very proud of that person, that he is going to excel in his career. And I think as I'm from West Bengal, I'm from a different states, and I have been to different states for my studies. This is what I have felt, that I am always asked this question: who is going to take care of your parents? Because you are a single child, you don't have a brother. So I think this comes very often, that firstly our parents are questioned, that why do they not have a male child, and then we are questioned in a sense that okay, it's great that you are going out to study, but then who is going to take care of your parents? And that instills a sense of guilt in us, which I think is universal in every woman who is going outside her home, be it to another village or another city, for any purpose. I think that is
Very good point. I think people need to keep that in mind. The first day or the second day when I spoke about my own experiences as a diasporic person, when I got my first job, and it was 42 miles away, and we had a young daughter. I was ready to turn down initially. I desperately wanted to be teaching. But I also knew that my husband had a wonderful, he's an urban planner and an economist, had a job that he had worked very hard to get and liked very much in Washington. Sometimes you have to negotiate, renegotiate, and if you have a understanding relationship, which is hard to generally, you are lucky if you have, I think one makes those adjustments. In my case, as I mentioned, overnight my husband decided he was going to give up his job and he was going to be the main provider for, and we moved 42 miles to where my college was. And then we came back 14 years later, but he had to work out of the home. His regular job he gave up in order to work, have his own job from home. I think I was ridden with incredible guilt. But there are times when you've got to be tough. Okay? Men have always done it. Hey, what about our lives? What about our dreams? What about our aspirations? I too want to fulfill something. I don't think it's that selfish. Society tells us, patriarchy says that we are so selfish if we leave our children behind. I think not. I think what we need, as long as the children are well taken care of, I think it's absolutely all right. I used to have this lady who was wonderful, a grandmother who had brought up her children and her grandchildren. And I found her near my college. And every morning I dropped my daughter off to her. And my daughter loved her. So she was another grandmother for her that I could not provide because my mother was in India. You find solutions, and they are happy solutions. But boy, the anguish. I mean, someday I have to bring my daughter with me, and she has to. You have to hear her side. Did she feel? Now I just, when I got the Aligarh opportunity, I did not. I discussed, but I did not ask. I wanted this, okay? And I was going to do it. If I didn't mind that my husband came along, I would have loved it. Difficult to do when you just had cataract surgery. But, next time, there'll be another time. But I think it's all right for women to do it and not feel guilty. Children belong to the father and the mother and the family. And it's not the woman's responsibility alone. I don't think I'm a bad mother. Time will tell. Right now, till now, she's just fine.
I just want to add a point that the first day when you were talking about your husband and how supportive he was during your tenure when you were working, so we were discussing that when a husband does all these things for his wife, it is considered that the wife is supremely lucky. But if it is considered and we all, I think all of us, all the women had this in our mind, but when the same is done by a wife, it's customary, you have to do it, it is compulsory.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that is what is needed to be changed. It has to be normalized that both are equally responsible in every narrative, and this is what we are trying to do, that we are trying to uplift women's narrative to the level that men's narrative
Absolutely.
are. We are not trying to downplay them in any sense.
Absolutely. And I think it enriches both the man and the woman. I see a softness in my husband. I see a tenderness towards our daughter. He's a better man for it, okay? And he is, I want to think that he's proud of me. When I said, I'm really worried, you've just had surgery, or should I go or not? My back has been hurting. He said, you've got to do what you must do, what you have been dreaming about. Every time you do it, it is beneficial and rewarding for everybody. And I have to say, it, I was lucky, okay? All I can say. I mean, but it was also a choice. It was a self-choice, okay? And there was a price one pays for it in many ways. I mean, I have only one daughter. If you ask me, I wouldn't mind having 5 more daughters, but there was neither the time nor the energy. So I think, but I think your point is that it is your generation that slowly, it is not about fighting with the husband. It's not about arguing. It's about negotiating quietly and gently and convincing that it is good for both and it is good for the children. Oh, I think so. Okay. Any last question? Any last comments? It is such a treat to be with you. It's nice. It's very nice. ठीक है? या एक okay. Samosa time. ये खाओ.
Something.
मैं नहीं खा सकती.
This is just an observation, not a question.
हाँ, that's good. I don't have to talk.
Yeah, I think in Bihar I came across something that would be, a structure made of mud, something resembling a bigger chulha sort of thing. Okay, and there women would come with their grains to roast them, and that was a place. And that was a place where women used to come together, be there and chat about different things and share their, again, joys and pains and everything. But I visited that place after 15 or 16 years and that was gone. I think, and I asked some women there in the village, where is that? They used to call it Gunsar. And I asked them, where is that Gunsar gone? And they said that it has been replaced. Now people take their grains to roast them in machines and all. So, and they were also sad about the fact that they do not get a chance to go out of their homes now. And recently I came to know that that thing is called bhad in this side of this part, I think, which is why we have this phrase bhad mein jao. Okay, and so my observation is actually women in different regions in India and maybe other parts of the world, they have devised ways, different ways to come out of their homes, to get together, to, enjoy and share their joys and pains together. Like we have the Baulis in Gujarat and Rajasthan, and we have this Jhula system. We have this Gunsar. We had this Gunsar system in Bihar, and during the Bihu festival in Assam, we had women, especially the girls, young girls, along with young boys. They come out, they go outside, and they dance, the Bihu dance. So they enjoy. I think this is my observation that women have devised different ways, to come out of that enclosed space, to be together and share their joys and pains. So that's all.
Absolutely. No. I very much appreciate the comments. All of us are enriched by comments because I'm not an authority on anything here. We all have experiences that we can share. So this is very good. I think we finally made it to 7 o'clock. Just a few minutes. Time to go and sing and dance. कल तक तो छोड़ो मुझे मेरे साथ कल आप जबरदस्त